So then there's just one more subject I want to briefly touch on before we finish up this chapter, and that is database rules. Now, you might remember when we started each different project and we initialized a database, it gave us two options, and we always started with test rules. And I said to you that this is fine for now, but when you come to properly publish your application, you might want to edit these. Now, these rules essentially control who can read data in your database and who can write data in your database. And when we use those test initial rules to test out our application, then it basically means that anyone can access the database content, right? Doesn't matter whether they're logged into our application or not. Now, it's always a good idea to restrict your data if you need to, so that people can't edit the data and people cannot read the data if you don't want them to. All right. So if we go to rules over here, you're going to see these default test rules. So at the minute, what we're saying is, okay, the service is the Cloud Firestore. We want to match the documents stored inside that Firestore, and the documents currently are going to be all the documents. That's what this means, right? So what we're saying now is we can allow read and write access to every single document inside our database. Now, what if we didn't want to do that? What if we wanted people to be able to read it, but maybe not write to it and change the database, right? So anyone can read the data, but not everyone can add a comment or manipulate the data in any way, shape or form. Well, what we need to do is change this so that a user has to be authenticated to do that. So let us now comment this stuff out. And what I'm going to do is paste this stuff in right here. So what I'm saying now, let me just get rid of this comment at the top, is the same thing. We're saying service is the Cloud Firestore. We want to grab the documents first of all, and we're matching every single document. Now we're allowing anyone to read those documents. We'll place a semicolon here, and we're only allowing people to write it, and then we place a colon to say a condition if the request that a user makes .auth.uid is not equal to null. So what we're saying here is if a user is not authenticated, we don't want them to be able to write, okay? If it is equal to null, then they can't write. If it's not equal to null, then they can write. All right, does that make sense? Cool. Now, what I wouldn't do is change your rules here and then publish them. What I'd do instead is take this and go to your application. And when we initialized a Firebase project here, what it did was create for us a firestore.rules document here. And these have the same default rules in them. So now what I want to do is delete those and paste in these ones we just created, where they can only write if they're logged in, right? So once we've done that, we can save it, and then we can deploy the application, and these will overwrite these rules right here. So let's do that. We'll say, first of all, npm run build. That's not because of this changing. We don't need to do that for this. That's because in the last lesson, we changed a sign up component to do that check alias function, right? So we're rebuilding the application to catch that change, first of all. Okay, so there's the project built. And finally, we just need to say Firebase deploy. And that is going to deploy our application, the newly built one, as well as this updated Firestore rules. Okay, so that deploy is complete. So if we come over here now and refresh this page, then we now see those updated rules have replaced the old ones right here. So now we're not letting anyone who's not logged in any write access whatsoever. Now, this is just touching the surface on Firestore rules. And it's hard to go into too much depth with them generically because it very much depends on the type of data that you have, what kind of rules that you create. Now, they're not that difficult to understand. And I would advise you checking out the documentation on rules. I'm going to leave a link attached to this lecture right here, so you can go read that. There's a couple of different pages which give you plenty of different examples if you want to read up on them just a little bit more.